I don't even know where to start, honestly. I guess it made sense at the time. Hiking out to that abandoned ranger cabin felt like a cool idea, something different to clear my head. I had found it online, buried in some forum, and people said it was deep enough into the national forest that nobody really bothered with it anymore. I left my car at a small turnout around noon and started walking. The trail wasn't official or anything, mostly a faint path through overgrown brush, and it felt like the kind of place where, if you twisted your ankle, you probably wouldn't get found for days. About 2 hours in, I saw something weird off to the side of the trail. It wasn't like a normal someone dumped trash kind of thing. It was a truck, totally rusted out, half-eaten by the woods. You could barely tell what color it used to be. It had vines crawling through the windows and no license plate. Something about it made me stop cold, but I told myself it was just abandoned like the cabin. Still, I took a wide arc around it, kept moving, and didn't look back. When I finally reached the cabin, the sun was just starting to dip behind the trees. It wasn't much, basically 4 walls and a roof that looked like it might cave in if you leaned on it wrong. Inside, it smelled like old wood and damp earth, but it felt better than sleeping outside. I set my backpack down, rolled out my sleeping bag on what was left of the floorboards, and ate a granola bar for dinner. No cell service out there, not even a single bar, but I didn't expect anything less. As it got darker, I decided to walk a few steps outside just to look at the stars. That's when I noticed it. Way out between the trees, there were these tiny flashes, like someone's camera going off, but super faint. Too faint for a phone flashlight, and too rhythmic to be random. I stared for a long time, trying to convince myself it was maybe just fireflies or something. But it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. I went back inside and latched the door, not that it would have stopped anyone if they really wanted to come in. The cabin was so old that even the lock felt like it would snap if you breathed on it wrong. I sat there for a while just listening. At first, it was the usual forest sounds, crickets, the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. But after a bit, it got weirdly quiet. No bugs, no wind, nothing. I kept telling myself I was just freaking myself out because of the flashes, but deep down I knew it was different. Every little creak in the wood made my skin crawl. I tried to read for a while with my headlamp on, but after a few minutes, I thought I heard something soft, like footsteps crunching on leaves outside, just slow and deliberate, moving around the cabin. At first, I froze, thinking maybe it was an animal. Maybe a deer, maybe even a bear. I held my breath and listened harder, but the steps didn't sound like something big crashing around. They were careful, almost human. And then came the softest noise that made my blood run cold. The sound of the door handle jiggling. Not hard, not like someone banging to get in, just this slow, testing movement, like they were trying not to be heard. I didn't even have time to think. I grabbed my boots, shoved my flashlight into my pocket, and made the stupidest but only move I could think of. I slipped out the tiny back window and into the woods, not even fully tying my laces, just running barefoot inside my boots, heart hammering so hard I thought I was going to pass out. I didn't dare turn on my flashlight. I just ran, half blind, crashing through the trees like an idiot. Every few seconds I thought I heard something behind me, sticks breaking, the faint shuffle of footsteps trying to keep pace. I couldn't tell if it was real or if my brain was just in full panic mode, but either way, I wasn't stopping to find out. Branches kept slapping my face and arms, and I'm pretty sure I lost my beanie somewhere along the way. The worst part was not knowing where I was going. Everything looked the same, endless dark trees, no trail, no landmarks. It was like the forest swallowed me up the second I left the cabin. After what felt like forever, I stumbled down a small ditch and landed hard on my hands and knees. That's when I realized something. The flashes were still happening. Way deeper in the woods now, but still going, like someone was moving through the trees taking pictures. Except it didn't make any sense. Who the hell would be out there doing that in the middle of nowhere at night? I stayed low, trying to catch my breath, when I heard it again. That same soft, slow crunching of footsteps. It was close. Way too close. I could feel the vibrations in the ground through my hands. I didn't even think. I crawled into some bushes and tried to make myself as small as possible, barely daring to breathe. I sat there hidden for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only a few minutes. I kept expecting to hear a voice, or see a flashlight sweeping through the trees, but it was dead silent except for the faint, steady flashes way out in the woods. It was so dark that I could barely see my own hands, but every time one of those flashes went off, I swore I could see a silhouette standing a few dozen feet away from me, just standing there, not moving, like they were waiting. I kept trying to tell myself it was a tree or a trick of the light, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to stay down, stay hidden, and not even blink. I don't know how long I stayed like that, muscles cramping up, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Eventually, I realized I couldn't just stay there forever. I needed to move, to put some real distance between me and that cabin, and whoever was near it. I picked a direction away from the flashes and crawled for a while before standing up and running again, slower this time, trying not to make so much noise. My brain kept flashing worst-case scenarios at me. That whoever it was had night vision goggles, that there were more of them out there, that maybe they weren't even human. I knew how crazy it sounded, but when you're alone in the woods, being hunted by something you can't see, logic kind of stops being useful. I was running on pure fear by that point, just desperate to find anything, a road, a trail, even a ditch big enough to hide in. After what felt like another eternity of stumbling through the woods, I finally spotted something that didn't look like endless trees. It was a fence. A busted old wooden fence, barely standing, but it meant I was near the edge of something. I followed it, staying low, until I found a dirt road. It looked barely used, full of potholes and overgrown on both sides, but at that point, it might as well have been a highway. I didn't even think about it. I took off jogging down the road, glancing back over my shoulder every few seconds like an idiot in a horror movie. Every shadow felt alive, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. I just kept telling myself if I could find some sign of civilization, I'd be okay. I just had to keep moving. I don't know how long I was running, but eventually, headlights appeared way down the road. It was a beat-up old truck, maybe belonging to a hunter or a farmer, I couldn't tell. I didn't even hesitate. I jumped into the middle of the road, waving my arms like a maniac. Luckily, the guy stopped before he ran me over. I must have looked insane, covered in dirt, scratched up, panting like a dog. I couldn't even get real words out at first. I just kept saying, someone's out there, over and over. The guy looked me up and down, clearly freaked out, but he let me jump into the back of his truck without asking too many questions. As we drove away, bumping along the dirt road, I kept looking over my shoulder at the woods getting smaller and smaller, but I never saw anyone step out of the trees. The guy ended up dropping me off at a tiny gas station about 20 minutes down the road. It was one of those places that barely has anything, just a few old pumps, a vending machine, and a payphone. I thanked him 100 times before he sped off like he wanted no part of whatever I had going on. I must have looked like hell because the old man working inside just stared at me like he wasn't sure if I was real or a ghost. I tried to call someone, but the payphone was dead, and of course, there was still no cell service. I ended up just sitting on the curb outside for what felt like hours, waiting for morning. Every time a branch creaked in the wind or a car passed by on the distant highway, I'd jump like I was back out there again, running for my life. When the sun finally started to come up, it didn't make me feel any better. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever, or whatever, was out there might have followed me. But nothing happened. No mysterious cars pulling up, no weird people lurking around. Just the quiet, boring life of a forgotten gas station on the edge of nowhere. Eventually, I was able to get a ride back to my car from a local who passed by, and I got the hell out of there without looking back once. I never reported it to anyone. What was I even gonna say? That someone was flashing a camera at me in the woods and tried to break into a cabin? That I ran like a coward and hid in some bushes all night? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed hidden in that cabin, or if I hadn't run fast enough. To this day, I still can't explain any of it. I've gone over it in my head a million times. Maybe it was just some weirdo messing around. Maybe it was some creepy backwoods thing I was too lucky to get away from. But the way those flashes were timed, the way the footsteps circled the cabin so quietly, it didn't feel random. It felt like they knew I was there, like they had been waiting. I still get chills thinking about that rusted-out truck I saw earlier too. The way it was hidden off the trail, almost like whoever drove it didn't want it to be found. Sometimes I wonder if that truck belonged to whoever was out there that night, or if maybe they were still watching it, waiting for someone stupid enough to get close. What really messes with me, though, is how it all just stopped. No one ever came running after me. No cars ever followed me out of the forest. It was like whatever was hunting me just gave up the second I crossed some invisible line. I'll never know what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did. I still can't hike alone anymore. Hell, even camping makes me nervous now. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I'm hearing those slow, careful footsteps again, just outside my window. I don't know what was out there in that forest. But whatever it wasn't supposed to be found. And I sure as hell wasn't supposed to see it. I've never been the kind of guy to believe in weird shit, you know? I've spent most of my life outdoors, camping, fishing, hiking, and honestly, the woods have always felt like a second home to me. That's why, when I decided to spend a quiet Saturday afternoon fishing at this small, half-forgotten reservoir near my town, I didn't think twice about going alone. It's one of those spots that barely anyone visits anymore. You gotta drive down this narrow dirt road, practically praying your tires don't pop on the rocks. It was peaceful, the kind of peace you only find where your phone has no signal, and the only sounds are the wind and the water lapping against the shore. I had been there for maybe an hour or two, just sitting on a cooler with my line in the water, when I noticed something weird. There was a dead tree branch sticking out of the shallow water near the bank, and something was caught on it, a piece of cloth flapping a little in the breeze. Curiosity got the better of me, so I reeled my line back, walked over, and fished it out. It was a torn flannel shirt, soaked and covered in mud, like it had been there for a while. The fabric was ripped at the shoulder, and weirdly it looked like there were dark stains that might have been blood, but it was so dirty I couldn't be sure. My stomach twisted a little, but I just shrugged it off, figured it was trash someone left behind. I tossed it aside and tried to focus back on fishing. As the sun started getting low, I packed up my gear and walked back to my truck, ready to set up camp for the night. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. All around my truck, in the dirt and the thin patches of grass, there were footprints, barefoot footprints. They circled the truck, not once or twice, but over and over, like someone had been pacing around it while I was down by the water. The weirdest part was how muddy they were, like whoever made them had come straight out of the reservoir, or somewhere just as nasty. They were small too, not child size, but not exactly adult either, like maybe a teenager. I stood there for a minute, just staring at them, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe some local kids messing around, right? I decided not to let it ruin my night. I moved my truck a little closer to the edge of the woods, set up my little fire pit, and started cooking some hot dogs. It was getting dark fast, and the woods around the reservoir turned into this thick black wall beyond the glow of the fire. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, telling myself I was just being paranoid because I was alone. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement between the trees. When I looked up, there were two people standing there, half hidden in the shadows, dirty, ragged-looking, like they hadn't seen a shower in months. They didn't say a word. They just stood there, staring at me, and for a second I honestly thought I was about to get jumped. I froze, gripping the handle of the small camping knife I kept on my belt, trying not to make any sudden moves. But just as quickly as they had appeared, they slipped back into the darkness without making a sound. I sat there by the fire, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, scanning the treeline for any sign of them. Minutes dragged by, but nothing happened. I kept telling myself they were just some drifters or maybe meth heads from town, but deep down, something felt off. There was something about the way they moved, too smooth, too quiet, like they weren't quite right. I debated getting in my truck and leaving, but pride and stubbornness kept me glued to that fire. The night crawled by painfully slow. I kept the fire going as long as I could, tossing on branch after branch, just for the light. Every now and then, I thought I could hear faint sounds from the woods, twigs snapping, the crunch of leaves. But every time I pointed my flashlight in that direction, there was nothing there. Then, around midnight, I started hearing something else. Laughter. Faint, high-pitched laughter, coming from different parts of the forest, sometimes close, sometimes far. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even constant, but it was enough to raise every hair on the back of my neck. It didn't sound like the kind of laugh you make when you hear a good joke. It sounded wrong, like someone trying to imitate what laughing is supposed to sound like, but not really getting it. I sat there gripping my flashlight and knife, too scared to even move, just staring into the woods like an idiot. Every time I thought the laughter had stopped, it would pick up again from a different direction, like whoever was out there was moving around me, circling me, playing some sick game. I kept flashing my light between the trees, but all I could catch were glimpses. Quick flashes of movement, a bare foot disappearing behind a trunk, a hand sliding out of sight. It was like they were toying with me, making sure I knew they were there without ever fully showing themselves again. My stomach was in knots, and I kept thinking how stupid I was for not leaving the second I saw those footprints. Around 2 or 3 a.m., the laughter finally faded out completely, and for a while there was just this heavy silence. I thought maybe it was over, that maybe whoever they were had gotten bored and left. I didn't dare pack up, though, I just stayed by the fire, poking at it, trying to keep it alive. The firewood was running low, and every shadow outside the light seemed to breathe and move like it was alive. I was wide awake, straining my ears for any sound, but the woods had gone completely dead. No crickets, no frogs, nothing. Just this heavy, unnatural stillness that made me feel like if I turned my back for even a second, something awful would happen. I must have nodded off at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up with a start. The fire had died down to just glowing embers, and the air was freezing cold. For a second, I didn't know what had woken me up, then I heard it again. A soft shuffle, maybe 20 feet away. I jerked my head around, squinting into the dark, and that's when I saw them. There were more of them now, not just the two from before. I counted at least 4, maybe 5 figures standing at the edge of the trees, just outside the reach of the firelight. They didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there watching me. I could feel their eyes on me, and it made my skin crawl so bad I felt like I could jump out of it. I don't know what kind of courage or stupidity kicked in, but I jumped up, grabbed my keys, and sprinted to my truck without even bothering to pack up my gear. I could hear footsteps behind me, fast, slapping barefoot steps on the dirt and gravel. And I swear, it felt like they were just inches from grabbing me. I threw myself into the truck, slammed the door, and locked it as fast as I could. For a few seconds, I just sat there panting, heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I didn't even think about anything else. I just jammed the key in the ignition, praying it would start, and when the engine roared to life, I nearly cried from relief. As I peeled out of there, tires kicking up dust and rocks, I could see them in the rearview mirror. They were standing in the middle of the dirt road, just watching me drive away. No chasing, no shouting, just standing there like they knew they didn't need to hurry. I didn't slow down once, not even when the road got rough and the truck bounced so hard I thought I might lose control. I just kept my foot on the gas until I hit the main road, where there were finally some streetlights and signs of life. Only when I got a few miles out did I finally pull over to catch my breath. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I spent the rest of the night parked at a 24-hour gas station, sitting in the cab of my truck with all the doors locked and a baseball bat on my lap. I didn't sleep a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, dirty, pale, hollow-eyed, just standing there in the dark. I never went back to that reservoir after that, and I don't even drive near that road anymore if I can help it. Sometimes, late at night, if I'm walking to my truck alone, or if the wind is just right, I swear I can hear that same creepy, broken laughter echoing somewhere just out of sight. I still can't explain what happened that night. I'm not even sure I want to. I told a couple of friends about it later, but honestly, nobody believed me. They all said it was probably squatters, or maybe some crazy locals messing around. I wanted to believe that too, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. There was something wrong with those people, if they were even people at all. The way they moved, the way they watched me without saying a word, the way the forest itself seemed to go dead silent when they were around. It just didn't feel human. And that laughter, man, that laughter still haunts me. It wasn't joy, it wasn't even malice. It was like hearing something pretending to be alive. It's been almost 3 years now, and I still think about that night more often than I'd like to admit. I wish I had some big revelation or some proof to show you, but I don't. It was just one of those things that happened and then stopped as suddenly as it started. No explanations, no real answers. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten to my truck in time, or if I'd stayed another night. But most of the time, I just try not to think about it at all. Because honestly, I'm scared that if I do, I'll start hearing that awful, broken laughter again. And this time, it might not be so far away. I've always been the kind of person who loves solo trips. The kind where you just throw a sleeping bag in the back of your SUV, find a quiet spot away from everyone, and crash for the night. That night was supposed to be like any other. Peaceful, a little chilly, but mostly uneventful. I found this pull-off area off a rural highway. Nothing official, just a dirt patch worn down by other campers or truckers, I guess. It felt remote enough to be private, but close enough to the road that I didn't feel completely isolated. I parked, cracked the windows just a little for air, locked the doors out of habit, and drifted off listening to the wind rustling the trees. I remember thinking how eerily quiet it was. No distant highway noise, no crickets, just this heavy silence. Sometime deep into the night, I woke up freezing. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel wrong. My windows were all fogged up from my breath, and for a second I just stared at the misty glass, trying to figure out what had pulled me from sleep. That's when I saw it. handprints. Clear, smudged handprints on the outside of the fogged windows. They were everywhere. Smears on the driver's side, the back window, even the passenger side. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break out. I didn't move at first, just sat there gripping the sleeping bag like an idiot, trying to tell myself it could be condensation tricks or maybe leftover marks from earlier. But deep down, I knew they hadn't been there when I went to sleep. I sat there for what felt like forever, barely breathing, straining my ears for any sound outside. But there was nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no cars passing by, just that same suffocating silence pressing in on me from every direction. Every logical thought in my head was screaming that I needed to get out of there, but at the same time, the idea of moving, of drawing attention to myself, felt like signing my own death warrant. I grabbed my phone from the seat next to me, but of course no signal. Not even a single bar. I debated turning on the engine and blasting out of there, but I was terrified that whoever had been out there was still nearby, maybe even crouching somewhere just out of sight. Eventually, the sky started to lighten just a bit, that weird pre-dawn gray that barely counts as daylight. I couldn't take it anymore. I climbed into the driver's seat as quietly as I could, heart slamming so loud I was sure someone could hear it, and started the engine. Nothing happened. For a second, I thought something had messed with my car during the night, and panic really started setting in. But when I turned the key again, it roared to life like normal. I didn't waste another second. I threw the SUV into drive and tore out of there, gravel kicking up behind me as I sped down the narrow back road, not even caring where it led, just desperate to put miles between me and that place. I had only been driving for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, my hands locked in a death grip on the steering wheel, when I saw headlights up ahead. At first, I felt this huge wave of relief, maybe another camper, or someone who could help if something was really wrong with my car. I slowed down just a little as the vehicle got closer, and that's when I saw it was an old tow truck, rusted and beat up, crawling toward me like it was hunting. The truck pulled halfway into the road, forcing me to stop. A guy climbed out, wearing greasy overalls and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He started waving at me to roll down my window, smiling this weird, stretched-out smile that didn't feel right at all. I cracked the window just an inch, enough to hear him mumble something about my car looking broken down and needing a tow back to town. But my SUV was running perfectly. There was no smoke, no weird noises, nothing. Every fiber of my being was screaming that something was wrong, that I shouldn't trust him. When I told him, through the tiny gap in the window, that I was fine and didn't need help, his smile dropped instantly. He stepped closer to my door, tapping the window with a dirty finger, insisting in this low, almost threatening voice that it wasn't safe for me to be out here alone. That was enough. I slammed my foot on the gas, swerving around his truck, barely missing the ditch on the side of the road. I didn't even look back at first, just focused on keeping the SUV on the narrow, winding road. My whole body was buzzing with adrenaline, like my brain had switched to survival mode. But after a minute, I couldn't help it. I checked the rearview mirror. That damn tow truck was following me, its headlights burning into the darkness behind me, getting closer and closer. I pushed the gas harder, but the road was rough and full of potholes, and every bump made me think I was going to lose control and crash. I kept thinking if I went off the road, I was dead. No one would even find me out here until it was way too late. The scariest part was how persistent he was. Every turn I took, every little fork in the road I chose at random, he stayed right behind me like he knew these roads by heart. There were moments I thought he was about to ram me, the way his truck would lurch forward and then back off again. It didn't feel random. It felt like he was playing with me, testing how fast I could go, how scared I could get before I made a mistake. I kept praying for a main road, a gas station, a damn streetlight, anything. But all I had was darkness and trees pressing in from both sides like walls. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spotted a highway sign through the trees. That ugly green glow was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I didn't even care what road it was or where it led. I just gunned it toward the on-ramp, tires screeching as I hit the pavement. The second I got onto the highway, I checked the mirror again, and the tow truck was gone. Just like that. No headlights, no engine noise, nothing. It was like he'd evaporated into thin air. I even slowed down a little, half expecting to see him lurking at the edge of the trees or tailing me with his lights off. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the tires on smooth asphalt and the distant headlights of actual traffic ahead. I kept driving for miles without stopping, too scared to even think about pulling over. Every car that passed me made my stomach twist, and I jumped every time I saw a truck in the distance. Eventually, I found a 24-hour gas station and pulled in under the bright fluorescent lights, shaking so hard I could barely unbuckle my seatbelt. I sat there for a long time, engine still running, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Part of me wanted to convince myself it had just been some weirdo trying to scam me, but deep down I knew it was something worse. Something way more sinister than just a guy looking to rob a stranded motorist. Even now, months later, I still can't explain how he disappeared so fast. I mean, those back roads didn't have a bunch of exits or places to hide a big tow truck like that. It was dense woods and a straight shot to the highway. No way he could have turned off without me seeing. I replay that night over and over in my head, trying to figure out if I missed something obvious, but it never adds up. And those handprints, I still get chills thinking about them. They weren't little taps or random smudges. They looked frantic, like someone was pressing their whole palm against the glass, desperate to get in. Whoever, or whatever, it was, they had been right there while I was sleeping, just a thin piece of glass between us. Since then, I can't sleep in my car anymore. I can't even bring myself to camp alone. The thought of being that vulnerable again, trapped and exposed like that, just makes my skin crawl. I installed cameras around my house, too, even though deep down I know it's not the same. It's weird, nothing actually happened to me that night. I didn't get hurt, I didn't get robbed, nothing technically went wrong. But it's the feeling that sticks with me, that I was being hunted. Like something out there was just waiting for me to make one wrong move. And the scariest part is, I'll never really know what it was or what would have happened if I had opened that door. Sometimes I wonder if it was all connected. The handprints, the tow truck guy, the feeling that something wasn't right from the moment I pulled into that spot. Maybe he had been watching me all along, waiting for the right time. Or maybe it wasn't even a normal person out there. I know how crazy that sounds, and I hate even thinking it, but there was something wrong about the whole thing, something that felt bigger than just a creep in a truck. Like the air itself was heavy with something I couldn't see. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that night, and I think if I had ignored it, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. I never went back to that area, and I never planned to. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up gasping from dreams where I see those handprints all over my bedroom windows. I'll never forget the terror of sitting frozen in that sleeping bag, too scared to even move, or the way that trucks seemed to materialize from nowhere, only to vanish like smoke once I reached safety. I guess some things just don't have explanations. And honestly, I'm fine with that. Whatever it was that found me out there that night, I just hope it never finds me again. I'm not the type to scare easy. I've spent a lot of time camping solo, way out where you barely get a bar of signal, if any. That weekend, I had picked a spot deep in the desert, a couple of miles off a long, empty stretch of highway. I set up my tent late in the afternoon, cooked a simple meal, and just enjoyed the silence. No other cars passed by the whole evening, not that I expected many out there. It felt like I had the entire desert to myself, and honestly, that's exactly what I was looking for. Before crashing for the night, I double-checked everything. My truck was locked, my gear was packed close, and the nearest signs of life were just a few scattered cactus and rocks under a wide open sky. I woke up around dawn, feeling that weird stiffness you get from sleeping on hard ground. But before I even unzipped my sleeping bag, something felt off. The air was dead still, but I had this heavy sense of being watched. Shaking it off, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, and that's when I saw it. Deep tire tracks, huge, heavy ones, leading straight from the highway across the desert floor and stopping right at my tent. They didn't curve off or disappear gradually. They just ended there, like whatever had driven up had vanished into thin air. I froze, heart hammering, scanning the open desert around me. There was nothing. No dust clouds, no engine sounds, no vehicles. Just endless sand and those fresh, impossible tracks. At first, I tried to tell myself it had to be some prank. Maybe someone saw my camp from the highway during the night and decided to mess with me. But the more I looked at the tracks, the less sense it made. They were deep, like something really heavy had driven across the desert. And the weirdest part, there were no footprints around, no disturbance except for those tires. It was just this straight, clean path leading right up to where I was sleeping. I even walked a bit along the tracks, squinting into the early morning sun, but they didn't trail off or curve. They literally just started at the road and ended at my tent. Like the vehicle had driven up, stopped, and then, what? Vanished? I started getting this crawling feeling in my gut, like every instinct was screaming at me to leave. I packed my stuff in record time, barely even rolling up the tent properly. Every few seconds I'd jerk my head around, half expecting to see something coming across the desert after me. But there was nothing, just that thick, heavy silence. When I finally got into my truck and turned the key, the engine hesitated for a second, which had never happened before, and my heart almost stopped. I swear I could feel something watching me, even though I couldn't see a damn thing out there. As soon as the engine kicked in, I floored it, heading straight back toward the highway without even looking back. My tires bumped and slid over the uneven desert ground, and for a moment I thought I was going to get stuck, but somehow I made it. When I hit the asphalt, I didn't slow down. It was only after a few miles that I dared to glance at the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the straight empty road stretching behind me, heat waves already starting to shimmer off the surface. I kept thinking about those tracks, though, about how deep they were, about how no dust was disturbed around them, like whatever made them was floating just above the ground, pressing down only where the tires hit. After about 20 minutes of driving, my rational brain finally started trying to make sense of it. Maybe it had been a construction vehicle. Maybe someone out there had some kind of big off-road rig. But then why would they drive all the way to some random solo camper's tent in the middle of nowhere without leaving any other marks, or even getting out? And where the hell did they go? I couldn't explain the tracks just stopping. It made my skin crawl every time I pictured it. I had this sick feeling in my stomach like I had gotten way too close to something I wasn't supposed to see, or something that had seen me and decided to let me go. This time, I drove straight into the nearest town without stopping, not even for gas, even though my tank was getting dangerously low. When I finally pulled into a dusty little gas station, I must have looked like hell because the guy at the counter kept giving me weird looks. I thought about telling him what happened, asking if anyone had seen a big truck or anything strange out there, but when I opened my mouth, the words just wouldn't come. It sounded too crazy, even in my own head. So I just paid for the gas, grabbed a lukewarm coffee from a machine that rattled louder than it should have, and sat in my truck for a while, trying to calm down. After a bit, I pulled out my phone and tried searching for anything. Reports of strange vehicles, missing hikers, weird sightings. Nothing. It was like that whole part of the desert didn't even exist to the internet. I even looked up satellite images later when I got home, trying to see if there were old roads or hidden trails near where I had camped, but there was nothing. Just empty, flat desert. And honestly, the more I dug, the worse I felt. It was like the whole thing wasn't supposed to make sense. Like it was meant to leave me stuck with that gnawing feeling, questioning if I was even safe out there anymore. That whole day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Even back in town, surrounded by people, I kept catching myself looking over my shoulder, feeling that same heavy pressure, like eyes were still on me. I didn't tell anyone, not my family, not my friends. I figured they'd either laugh it off or think I'd lost it out there in the heat. But I knew what I saw. Those tire tracks were real. They were deep enough that my boot almost disappeared when I stepped into them. And the way they just ended, nothing about it felt human. I've seen plenty of off-road tracks before. These weren't the same. They were too perfect, too intentional. For weeks after, I kept thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. What if whatever made those tracks hadn't just stopped at the tent? What if it had been standing there, just outside the thin nylon wall, watching me sleep? That thought alone kept me up at night more than once. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, convinced I heard the crunch of tires outside my window. It got so bad that I started sleeping with a light on, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. Even now, when I think about camping alone again, I get this tight, sick feeling in my chest. Like maybe I left something unfinished out there. Like maybe it's still waiting. One of the things that still eats at me is how quiet it was. If some vehicle had driven across the desert, I would have heard it. Engines are loud out there, with nothing but open space to carry the sound. But that night, there was just silence. No rumble, no headlights, no warning. It's like it was there without ever actually being there. Every time I try to explain it, even just to myself, I hit a wall. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't half asleep. The tracks were real. I felt the impressions under my boots. I saw the way the sand was pushed out to the sides, like something extremely heavy had compressed it. And the weirdest detail I can't forget, the tracks weren't just normal tire marks. They had this strange pattern running through them, like faint grooves or ridges, almost mechanical but wrong. Not any tread I've ever seen. I've looked up every kind of off-road tire since then, even agricultural equipment, military vehicles, you name it, nothing matches. It's like whatever made those tracks wasn't from any vehicle that's supposed to exist. Sometimes, late at night when I'm driving and I see tire tracks cutting off into the desert, my stomach knots up so tight it hurts. I can't help but wonder if someone else, somewhere, woke up to the same thing. I never went back to that spot. Hell, I barely camp alone anymore. It's like something shifted for me that morning. Like I realized how fragile the line between normal and unexplainable really is. I'll still get the itch to head out sometimes, craving that quiet and isolation. But the second I start packing, this cold dread creeps up my spine and I end up staying home. Friends have joked about it, saying I got scared off by some harmless off-roader or a weird desert mirage, but they don't get it. They didn't see those tracks. They didn't feel that thing, whatever it was, watching them through the thin fabric of a tent in the middle of nowhere. The scariest part is, there was no ending to it. No climax, no confrontation. It just stopped. Like whatever came out there decided not to finish whatever it started. And I still don't know why. I think about it way more than I should, trying to find some kind of explanation, some kind of logic, but there's nothing. Just deep tire tracks that start at a highway, end at a tent, and a feeling in my gut that something found me that night. And for reasons I'll never understand, it let me go.